at CVMC.
Yeah. I brought, because I knew Barb wasn't coming with a tracing paper, I brought a bunch of different colors of Post-its. Oh, you have some?
I did find
Oh,
some.
great.
They're not what big sheets she would have, but in flood prep last
Okay.
week,
Ah.
we found tracing paper in the bottom of the drawer. We had to pull all the drawers out.
Really?
Yeah. Because all of our
Look at all
offices
this.
are in the basement, so the 92 flooded the basement of the city hall, so anytime we get flood warnings, we've got to go around and take all the filing cabinet drawers out, put them up. And because it was a Friday, we had to make sure
Yeah.
they were really up because no one would be around for the weekend. So, and I found tracing paper.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like everyone's here, so we could get started. So we'll call the meeting to order. So I'll be leading the meeting tonight as a little work session for us to get started on the city plan. This is to give Leslie a little bit of a break. The first thing that we'll do is approve the agenda. Does anyone have anything to add or change about the agenda? Okay, we'll deem it approved. And then next we have comments from the chair. I don't have anything to add at all. There were some emails going around the last 2 weeks from the city. Is there anything notable?
I think maybe Mike, if you can just go over the RFP filling out, because there were some comments about that. Just to like, bring everyone up to speed on that, because I don't think we've discussed that.
Yeah, so the city, so we got a municipal planning grant last fall to do basically a master plan for State Street. And then throughout the winter, there was some additional projects in the downtown. And so there was a desire to expand that to be the entire, basically the downtown core, to do a downtown master plan, which I think a lot of us
talk about
have
that.
talked about.
No, but we did as a group.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been a little bit of a while, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We need our memories refreshed.
So that RFP went out over, 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
So
Since you don't work in state government, you might not know what RFP stands for. It means request for proposal. It's when we ask for people to submit applications, we call them bids, to hire them to do the work. So when we say we put out an RFP, it's that we're requesting that we receive bids from various consultants to basically do this work for us, which would be making a plan for State Street.
yeah, and now it'll be State Street, including Barry and Main, Barry out to Hubbard, Main out to, I think, School, and so you have a little bit of Langdon, a little bit of School, a little bit of Elm, but primarily just that downtown core. And the idea is to do streetscapes, because it really isn't going to change a lot. The streetscape that's identified for State Street is probably going to be replicated for those same concepts, because you want to have a consistent theme. So there's probably not a big stretch to continue that. But it's also going to do a land use analysis and do a little bit, because it really came out of a discussion of the Confluence Park, which was discussed for Taylor Street. So the Taylor Street project, they're going to put at the confluence of the North Branch and Winooski, they're going to put in a park, and then they wanted to do one on the other side where the pedestrian bridge comes over. We purchased 3 parcels over here, so the city now owns these parcels. We're going to put the bike path in, we're going to put the bridge in, and we've got one lot that's available for economic development redevelopment, and then we had another parcel that was going to be a parking lot. And the question came up, what should we do? Should we keep with that plan of a parking lot and economic development, or should we make the parking lot smaller? Should we remove the parking lot altogether and have a bigger park? Do we still want to use the economic development lot for economic development, or do we want that to be some kind of pocket park or something? So that was kind of the questions that came up. So what we wanted to be able to do was have the consultant that's doing these downtown streetscapes to also take a look at our public assets that we have, the Jacobs parking lot, these 3 lots, the Heaney parking lot. We have some parking lots behind City Hall, and just kind of take a look at what our needs are based on what our land uses are. So do a little bit of a land use analysis and look at, you know, should we use this for parking? You know, if we take out, for example, if we take out the parking on Berry Street, which has been a long time proposal because we need to connect our bike path, if we take that parking out, we might need to have that a parking lot to make up for those losses of those parking spaces. We just have to have a conversation where we start to balance things, not looking just isolated at one parcel. We really have to look at the downtown and go and say, what are our downtown needs? We know we don't have a lot of green space, and we should do more to have more green space, but we also have to balance these other needs of if we want bike lanes, we might lose parking. How do we balance all of our needs to kind of satisfy everybody's goals with a very limited number of resources? So that's the third piece. So there'll be the State Street streetscape, the Main Street, Berry Street streetscape as part 2, and then the third part is this land use analysis to help guide and inform the Planning Commission and City Council on what should we do about what we call 12 Main Street.
Can
So
you repeat
Moab.
that recap again? So we're gonna be looking at the State Street,
Streetscape,
okay, State Street, streetscape.
because that's the one that we
See,
already
that's
have a
what kind of
grant for, so we have to fulfill those grant
Right.
obligations.
Okay,
Then we will do the streetscapes for the rest of the downtown core, so that's, you know, Main Street and Berry and a few other smaller streets.
and I remember us discussing that, cause it made sense to, you know, while we were already doing that, to kinda look at it more as a unit.
Mm-hmm.
So Berry Street, others, and that's also a streetscape.
Streetscape, yeah.
That is a hard word. Okay, and then the third piece was,
Is looking at the land use analysis and these other public parcels.
And the State Street streetscape is triggered by the work on the bridge.
Yeah, and
right?
that was
Okay.
triggered by the fact that we have to replace that bridge in 3 or 4 years. So the hope is if we've got a good conceptual plan, then we might be able to talk about, do we want to realign the curbs to make wider sidewalks? The sidewalks are quite narrow on parts of State Street. It would be nice to have wider sidewalks, but if we're gonna make wider sidewalks, something else has to go. On-street parking, maybe a turn lane, you know, we really have to start to look at, you know, how could we make those wider? Other people may argue we wanna have bike lanes. Well, if we wanna have bike lanes, same question, where would we, what do we give up to have bike lanes? And does it make sense to give those up? And if we gave up parking, where would we replace that parking?
So when do you think that, what's the timeline going to be as far as us having a product to look at?
Well, April 12th is when I think it's April 12th is when the RFP
Proposals are due.
proposals are due. They would then have about a year to complete the project, but I think they're gonna be touching base. Our discussions that we had before with the net zero winners, the Team Bridges and the other proposals, I think are gonna factor in a lot more. So I think if we're gonna invite Team Bridges, I would wait till after we have a consultant on board so we can have them hear that presentation as well, because I think as they're working on this, we really should be integrating, if we're going to integrate it, that's where we would integrate those ideas, is into that downtown master plan. There may be pieces that are outside. You know, Team Bridges talked about remote parking and using the railroad as a shuttle to get people in and out of downtown. That may happen outside, but what happens in the downtown core, we should really have reflected in that downtown master plan.
So do you anticipate getting proposals from entities like the Team Bridges? I mean, I know they're kind of a group.
Yeah, I've received interest from at least 3 separate consulting firms right now. At a certain point, sometimes they start coming together. Sometimes 2 of them will come in, one will be a landscape architect and another one will be more in the traffic side, and they might come together to put in a single proposal. So I'm not sure if they'll start mixing together at a certain point, but right now I know we have at least 3 interested consultants.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. Thanks for the update. Any more comments?
I'll throw out one other quick one, just to go and say that on Wednesday, we will be having the first, maybe the only, potentially zoning, for the interim zoning, and we put that together and we forwarded that, the interim zoning for consideration. And so, council will be taking that up on Wednesday. So they may hear it, vote that day, they may hear it, make some changes and wanna have another hearing. It's up to
Wait,
them.
can you back up a little bit? Cause I know we're having a public hearing on some
the-
changes, but
All right, so.
what are they gonna be hearing?
They're hearing the interim changes, which were just the steep slopes, not buildable area, just steep slopes, 30%,
The landscape,
and the landscape rules.
right, we
So,
felt like those were a priority, we wanted to get them moved
yeah, because
faster.
they will impact projects that are being applied for the spring construction season. And because it takes a long time for us, you know, our hearing's not till April on the permanent changes, then it will be time before it goes to council, and then council will have to have hearings, and so those probably won't be ready till the end of June before they're actually adopted. By then, we've kind of missed a chunk, so hopefully this gets the important fixes through so we can get some good projects moving.
Do you think you'll need one of us on hand to explain anything?
Wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
But I will be there, and they have been, the council has been briefed on it already, so.
What time is their meeting?
It's good, this one will be starting at 7. So the public hearing is scheduled for 7:15. So it was initially warned for 6:45, then council had a meeting set up, an executive session that's gonna go 6 to 7, so they had to push the zoning hearing to 7:15. So,
It's right at bedtime. It's like the worst time.
I could feasibly make it. And anyone else who wants to? But
We'll remember that.
actually have a birthday party to go to after that, so
Oh, right.
yeah. It's fine. Okay, so I'll plan unless we hear through email that someone else wants to attend and represent us, which is open. Just so you know. Any other business? Okay, so the business number 4 on the agenda, general business, comments from the public, and there's no one here, so I think we can move past that to our work on the city plan, which is where things become kind of unstructured, I guess. We have tracing paper and we have loads of ideas. Anybody have an idea about where to start?
Nominate John.
Sorry, I got a text message and
Is
I'm a little
it a
alert
text?
to,
Understandably honest.
Is it a text
Yeah.
from the future Montpelier? Future generation?
no, it's
Future
just all.
just looking for microphones, that's all. See one that is under there.
Oh, and I'm gonna take notes of everything, and I'll type those up and email them around, and I guess potentially I could put them on the website.
Yeah, so we could
You wanna-
potentially project this, although do we have an HDMI cable?
That sounds like a fancy
If
word
not,
for
if not,
dongle.
you can actually just go on the website.
Do you
That's not gonna work.
Need some sort of conversion.
need one of those? I can go get one of those if you want.
Are these maps the same except this one's a bit more zoomed in?
Yeah, this one is
Trying to
supposed to be
figure that out.
town-wide, as much as possible.
Yeah.
Captures most of it. This one is zoomed into the downtown. Just because it's a little bit.
Where the action's at.
I'll get the.
Thank you for asking that, because I was trying to figure it
I
out.
assumed they were the same. I didn't look at that one.
I was
Where-
like, I
where
feel
is
like I should know this.
Where is that?
It's a
So
trick
this-
question. That's
so this-
actually Barry
So
over
this is
there.
Montpelier Planning Commission.
This is Montpelier when Mercury's in retrograde.
Yeah, right. Yeah. so-
So I put two links to two maps up on our plan website. One is one that I made like in August 2017 and probably could be updated, but I haven't had time to do that. Or I guess if people have ideas on what could be on it, I could do that instead of going through and aimlessly adding or removing things. And then the other one is just a map that everyone here has access to, that you can add points to or lines or draw on and add to like a maintain, evolve, transform sort of planning commission workspace.
Do you wanna just go over the transform, evolve, maintain language? Emery hasn't been here for that discussion and we could all use the recap.
Yeah.
You're just our excuse to like remember things we should know.
So backing up some, we have to come up with a city plan, and that has various components to it that we need to include. One of those should be something that articulates a vision. Like, why are we doing this? And a good way to do that is to try to document like what about our city do we want to change or not change. So someone should be able to either look at a map, and it's not only things that can be mapped, but looking at a map can be a helpful way to do it, and understand like in Montpelier in 20, 30, 50 years, what's going to be different about it, and making sure that we all understand, or that we're working towards a common vision is important. So going through an exercise where we start just putting it down on paper, even if we don't all agree or that it's all crystal clear, can just be a good way for us to identify things that everyone agrees with, or things that maybe need more work, and then we can start to prioritize how to get there and how that'll happen. So the idea of putting things into baskets around what do we want to maintain, so what do we like about Montpelier, and what we may need to take actions to make sure that doesn't change, or what do we want to completely transform, and then the third category is what do we want to evolve, so maybe it's something in between the two. So that's generally the concept around the maintain, evolve, transform mapping exercise. And it's a good way to, and if we're going to collect information from other people, we can do away with those labels if we want. We can just ask, what do you want to change about Montpelier, if you could change anything. And we have a tool now that Stone Environmental is working with Public Works that I think we should be able to use to gather input from Montpelier's citizens as soon as I don't know, if I can get the keys to it, I could probably set something up, but Stone should be able to take a lot of those map layers that we have and make them interactive. But in the meanwhile, I just created a simple Google map that we can all edit and have access to. And anyone can go to it, but unless they've been included or given editor privileges, they won't be able to add or change things. So do we
Just gotta
have
plug got one of these guys?
I doubt it.
Not even one of those.
I don't even know what that is, Mike.
You got that one?
No, I don't think so.
Wow.
Do you
Can
wanna
you
use
log
mine?
into? I think we have the same.
Will that fit in mine?
Oh,
Do we have
That'll work. Yeah.
mine? Hold
actually,
it
you
up.
can. Old school technology there. Probably can't pull it too far, but.
It's technically not my computer.
It has your name on it.
Yeah.
It's all in there.
Legal welts.
we go.
Okay, I can hit the
You-
lights
Yeah.
if,
It's just the one that says council. Otherwise, we'll get the gardening club over here.
I just know the label.
There's 3 different notes signifying it's
After repeatedly turning off other people's lights.
So on our plan website, which at some point we probably need to figure out what's going on here, how we're using it, but
I think it would help to set aside some time to kind of coordinate our efforts and how exactly we'll use it.
yeah. If you go down to the bottom of the homepage, I just put these links up here.
I have the original of the painting right there in my home.
Oh,
There we go. You'll see 2 links. One is for a map with layers for the plan, and another edit, maintain, evolve, transform map. So this was one that created back a while ago. If you click the little sheets of paper that are stacked here, it'll open up some layers that you can toggle on and off. You can see they include, building footprints that are colored by use, our river corridors, flood hazard areas, parcels, sidewalks, wetlands, etc., natural communities from the Conservation Committee. Probably like an old zoning district proposal that we should remove, because this was before I think we adapted the zoning. Our sewer mains, water mains, various paths, etc. So
So we made some of our zoning district decisions based on where the sewer mains and water mains ended, just for people's history.
And one of the things we'll eventually need to include in the plan is statute requires us to include a land use map, a future land use map, transportation plan, a utilities plan, and then another one that's more natural resource focused. So we'll have a lot of these components be separate maps included in the plan, but the maintain, evolve, transform one is really to take all of those into consideration and come up with more of a vision statement if you want. So this map is just essentially should serve as a reference point, and I can add or remove things as people want. We can even feed our maintain, evolve, transform points into this map if we want to have that as a layer to toggle on and off.
So when you say add, you don't mean just toggle that little check mark. You mean adding a whole nother layer to that list.
Right,
Be turned
exactly, yeah. So in the evolve, maintain, evolve, transform, and I did this several minutes before coming here, so I came up with examples that are possibly not appropriate or the best, but and I created again these 3 categories: transform, evolve, maintain, and one for placeholder for questions or comments. So if you were to log in, and I'm guessing we're logged in as Leslie because this opened in edit mode. If it were someone not logged in or who doesn't have edit access, you don't have the ability to edit it. But with this, you can essentially just add a point or a line if you wanted. So let's say we wanted to transform the Historical Society Museum, which I don't know why we would. We probably don't want to do that at all, but it's listed as point 3, so do away with history.
Yeah, this is a good thing you're editing that.
Yeah.
Museum of the Future,
Okay,
that's what we
that-
want.
Do away with the museum.
Oh my goodness.
I got married, by the way, so I hope,
Museum.
let's not do that.
You'd be the last to get married there now.
and you can add a description. And if you save it, it'll go there. Maybe we decide to change that from a different category, move it there. And you can order them, they'll change the sequence of the numbers. If you zoom out, it'd be easier to see with a different base map. It's not letting me done. So you can see what our points are there. And we can just take that and have it feed into the other map as a layer if we'd like. You can also export it or view it as a table. We can add different categories if we want, aside from just description, if we wanted to have it priority ranking or whatever we wanted to do. But I
Do
just
we
thought-
wanna put in some right now, just try it out? Does anyone have any?
So here I put in, Main Street Shaw Stonecutter intersection, make
Oh,
safer
yeah.
and pedestrian oriented
Is
as
it a
a
disaster?
transform. Here evolve the pedestrian connection between National Life and downtown. Maintain access.
Transformational could be the revive rail line for commuter rail service. I mean, that's one that has been proposed by Team Bridges, and a number of other people are looking into that. That would be a transformative project. It's not something that's here. We're not evolving and making it better. We're completely adding something new.
So we could do it as a line, but I'm not going to trace the entire railway.
You can get up close. Yeah, that's good.
It's supposed to be light rail, like, or something?
Yeah, it was just, well, there are two proposals. One that's going to, that Team Bridges, and we've actually been trying to do a study, getting some funding for a study, which would look at just the Washington County line. So it goes from Montpelier Junction to Berry City, and the idea is that could be just a light rail commuter trolley type system. We'd look at what cost effectiveness, whether it would work. That would allow for much better access. If you wanted to have commuter lots, if you wanted to move parking lots to the outside, that would work much better, because you could, if you lived in Berry City and worked in Montpelier, you could just go down to the Granite Museum and park, jump on the rail line. You'd probably be faster using a rail shuttle to Montpelier than you would actually driving your car in the traffic. The other discussion that's been going on, which is more statewide and we haven't been involved as much in, are folks who want to connect Montpelier to Burlington in Essex, using the high-speed line on I-89. So that would be a much bigger, different project.
Are you guys involved in that discussion with the state, or?
I mean, Blittersdorf is a private individual who has interest in trying to see that happen, so he's kind of putting his own money and his own capital behind it to try to see if he could get that to work. He's bought Bud cars, which are vehicles that would actually be able to make that journey, but there's a lot of cost involved in actually doing
V-Trans
it.
did do a cost analysis, something like we'd have to subsidize it to the tune of around $300,000 and some odd per rider. So
Per
we
rider?
could just buy everyone a house instead.
Yeah, so that idea is still being pushed and considered, so I'm sure it's one that would at least make it on our list of things for conversation. Whether we decide to include it in our final plan would probably come with a lot of input from the transportation committee and the public on whether that's something we want to pursue, or if that's just an idea that, you know, we're going to get a lot of ideas.
Either
that
way,
people are
I
just
think,
gonna
like,
give us.
the
We get
rail
'em.
line right now. We can all agree, totally useless space.
Yep.
You know, something should happen. Whether or not it's rail, we probably don't know, but that may just be an outcome of the plan that we have a study or
Yep.
dedicate resources to figuring out how to effectively use that space.
I think the same thing could apply to the waterfront there too, right? I mean, maybe we don't know exactly how we'd like to transform it, but it seems like everyone in the city has an interest in wanting to see it be used better.
Downtown generally, or?
The waterfront strip along the rail line there, just all those parking lots.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, Leslie.
No, I think that was, I had a totally separate idea, so it's better to continue with this conversation.
If you accidentally add points, you can delete them by hitting the garbage can select. So, what do people want? Is this useful? Is
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is it like, that's nice, we're not gonna use it? Is it, give it a
No,
try, and we
I-
can decide whether or not it's a good fit for us?
Let's plug in some more ideas, I mean, cause we can take this and just put it on our website as a layer, you know, just like initial thoughts, brainstorming session.
Yeah.
So one, I don't think it's been, I don't know if it's been part of any of the proposals, but the base of National Life Drive, if you run down it, then you're kind of stuck running on a highway without a shoulder to get to the bike path. There needs to be some sort of connection, pedestrian access, whether it's, you know, via Green Mountain Drive, whether there's a crossing to get to Green Mountain Drive to get to the bike path, or another way, but,
It has been talked about.
yeah, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
And the reason why it's difficult is because it's technically a limited access highway, and you're not supposed to have sidewalks on a limited access highway. So that's where,
What's the,
I would say add pedestrian access to connect National Life Drive and
Green Mountain Drive.
Green Mountain Drive, yeah.
I think that's in our gap analysis that we did for the complete streets plan. That was identified, and there are a couple of options that have come up for how to fix that. One is to move Green Mountain Drive down to make National Life Drive and Green Mountain Drive a four-way, and therefore you could put a light there. Green Mountain Drive doesn't have the problems anymore, and that would exit into that parking lot for Green Mountain Power.
You just add pedestrian, yeah.
what about U32? Is there a need for some non-motorized connection through? Is that something we'd want?
Bike path,
If you could bike or ski to U32 to the College of Fine Arts.
I think a lot of these will be able to populate through those various plans that we have. The Complete Streets Plan identifies a number of gaps that need to get fixed. I think there's the green print that I think came up, the parks, and those guys, they have a plan that would talk about, yep, just like that, a line that would connect those. On its way across, I think the gap analysis talks about a sidewalk from U32 down to, we have a high school, but we don't have sidewalk on Callison Hill, I don't believe. So you don't have walking, you can't walk there if you happen to be a student. We really should have bike lanes and at least a sidewalk on one side.
Yeah. And I think cars drive pretty fast up there, right? I
It's a
mean,
shortcut.
It's tempting to, because it's so wide, you know?
There's not many.
Yeah.
You can also add photos to all of
I've
these.
seen deer though at night.
I saw like a dozen deer on college last night. Crossing the street was amazing.
Oh,
What did they do?
just one after the other.
Yeah, just like a huge clump.
Do we get rid of the deer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eradication plan for College Street area.
That's a good idea, John.
So the idea with this map is that we would all take individual time and think about it, cause I'm like, this is just my beginning of thinking about it and I'd like time to do it, but I wasn't quite sure what the vision was, or maybe that's what we're discussing.
Yeah, I mean, I would think it would be great if you, over the next while, we think about it. Even take photos with your phone and you can add those. That'll like really bring it to life, I think, when you see something, you're like, I would like that to change in Montpelier, or I really like that, and we should identify that as something we value.
Are we concerned about it becoming unwieldy when we start to have several dozen points up here, or is that kind of the idea?
I
to
think
be-
that's the idea, and
Yeah.
then when we have some of these meetings, maybe we can go through and consolidate, clear some out, or categorize, or we can see how it goes. I've not done this, so.
Yeah, no?
And
That's
I
good.
think
That's good
eventually we would be kind of breaking it into the different. We'll eventually be thinking about it on a chapter by chapter level. I mean, at this scale, we're just getting ideas down to talk about. But at a certain point, when we start talking about the historic resources chapter, we're going to have that discussion of the historic museum, and we're going to have that discussion about, do we match our design review to our historic district?
I'm imagining before we even get there that we start bringing in the committee's feedback, right? And I guess we could incorporate them along the same way. So,
Yeah, or we'll have like the town-wide, I think, survey tool that we can see if there are any like patterns that emerge there. We could, if we have our stuff done, a good amount of it done first, we can have it as a base layer that people could also potentially either, vote up or down or something along those lines, so that they're not just adding to things that are obvious. And then the other part that maybe, let's see. How do we get to? All right, don't think I can open that from here. I'm not gonna go into Leslie's email. So, but is the spreadsheet, with the tables that, I worked with Barb on to give the committee's guidance on, how they could submit what their goals are, and their strategies that would relate to those. So to have them list goals that you can measure, that someone can say, yes, we met that, or no, we didn't. And then, how do we measure that? And then list out whatever related strategies are.
And that's a little bit of the piece that I've been trying to work on in between meetings, is to try to go and start to pull some language together, so that way the committees, when they start to meet to talk about this, they're not starting with nothing. What do we already have in our plans that talks about, what are our aspirations, what are our goals, and then say that these are just places to start the conversation, and maybe they're pretty close to what everybody thinks, maybe they're not, but at least it's a place for people to start thinking, and it helps to, when you see it written out, to go and see how you would do something similar to that.
So do you wanna, we wanna practice doing some more? I mean, I think it helps me to do it a few times so we can determine what falls into which basket. We've got we did a few transform, evolve, I mean, I think we want to increase affordable housing. I don't know how we would signify that on the map. Maybe there's certain spots where we want to encourage it.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be perfect. So
It may be one that would just go into the questions and comments. That may be
right.
affordable housing may be something that just doesn't fit on a point.
Well, I feel like it would be nice if we could identify some spot, I mean,
Yeah.
it's been a discussion, right?
Yeah.
If we knew there was one, if we knew
Well, some
Saban's
general,
pasture is a great place for this, and
I mean, can you make
Well, we
like broad area?
Right,
Or do you just do points? I guess you just do points.
You can draw and make broad area. You can draw lines. You have to click the pencil. There you go. But in general, I think we want to increase housing opportunities in and around our within walking distance of our downtown. Oops.
We may need to revisit what we think the radius is for that. 'Cause I know we've had discussions in here before, and I remember debating, like, 1.5 miles, 2 miles, like, what's actually walkable? Do you factor in hills?
And plus the schools too, because like the whole Bailey Avenue place, people have to like walk a whole mile to get to the middle school. And
Really?
that can make people late to school.
It also builds character.
Especially in winter.
I tell Aaron, grew up in Nebraska.
It's nice that that's considered walkable though, that they are actually walking from that.
Yeah. Lots of people, like, their parents work in other towns, so they have to leave early, so sometimes they have to walk.
We tend to focus in and around the downtown, but we should also.
I mean, just as an example of a maintain, you could, we might get comments from a place like College Street or up by VCFA to maintain the historic character of this, residential neighborhood. Maybe it's College Street past. We might get comments about maintaining the character of a neighborhood, whether it's historic or not historic.
the
Town
character-
Hill may say we want to maintain the
We gotta define character.
Yeah, I think we avoid ever putting the word character or narrative down because it's meaningless.
I mean,
There's got to be something about it.
I think you're right, we're gonna get that comment, but I don't know that we need to put it in right now, because
Or
I feel
we
like
should
a more-
encourage them to articulate what about
What
that
we're
character
measuring,
is
yeah.
that they like and value.
I think what people do though is then they fall back on density and things, and then that's what I'm scared of. I'm scared of people focusing on things that aren't really preserving the character, but they're measurable things that people can get behind.
We're gonna talk about historic facades or.
Yeah, there's
Yeah, density
There's
is just a
setbacks.
measure of housing units. You can't see that.
But we see it over and over, like so. Yeah, how do we talk about character and leave room for building out housing and all the other goals we have?
Well, let's identify what about that character makes it that we value. Is it like architectural detailing? Is it, scale and massing? And if so, like what about it? Those are all like tangible things that you
That's my
can.
property value.
I mean, that's also something we could look at, and I should add probably a layer, right? Got a 3D rendering of property value per acre. Like, we probably want to increase the value of our communities in Montpelier if we want these levels of services. So what kinds of development, what does that look like? There are clear patterns, you know. The stuff we built, ironically, the stuff we built after zoning is worth a lot less than on a per acre basis than what we built before zoning. So we need, you know.
Just zoning in general, not our recent zoning changes.
No, right. Zoning in Montpelier.
Yeah,
Zoning in Montpelier.
This planning commission ruined.
That's what I was worried about.
I'd like to submit my letter of resignation.
Okay,
I think that's a great point, though, about defining character.
oh, yeah, it's really
Going to be one of
hard.
the biggest challenges.
But we don't have to define it. We can focus on actual things.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be each person, so what does that mean?
Right.
Following up.
So, retain historic nature of Cliff Street neighborhood. No,
Not gonna put that one there.
um,
We could put, what do we do over here?
now, there's been some talk about Necky leaving, right?
Yes.
Is that something we wanna, you know, signal that we would like to keep them here? I don't know if we can do it through this, but we could at least say, you know,
Yeah, I
maintain
mean,
presence of schools,
Mhm.
you know, beyond the public school system, having higher education available is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think those would both fall into our education plan, which we're required to have, and our economic development plan, which we're required to have, both of which are gonna touch on those, maintaining those
Okay.
opportunities.
That's good, because I don't think we had any input on that during our all committee kickoff meeting. I don't think anybody's goals were
Right.
to maintain higher education institutions.
Vocational.
There you go. Perfect.
you know, one question we had during the zoning is, for a number of these areas, what is the,
Kiwi?
right, what is the vision? Oops, this should be.
Maintain, we already had a maintain for Hubbard Park Trails.
What about a park in District 3?
I don't know my districts off the top.
That's the
That's like
south
over
of
here.
Berlin.
Basically behind my house. Like in my
Behind, park behind Leslie's
yeah.
house.
Yes, that's what I want.
She's going to donate her backyard, in fact.
Actually,
May have to have
we
a
have a
conflict
network
of
of
interest.
trails back there that are privately owned. But, yeah, somewhere in that realm there, or on Berlin Street, or, you
It's
know.
certainly in the council's goals, has
Yeah,
been to
just-
study that, so.
That could be a question or comment, you know, do we wanna have access to, cause the closest playground to me is
Hmm.
the elementary school, I think. Which, you know,
It's
we
pretty
can
much the
manage,
only
it's
one in
not that
town.
far. But Park/playground in District 3, that's what I would write. Yeah.
That'd be a transform or an evolve.
That's a good question.
There's not much there to evolve, right?
It's just woods. There's like a farm somewhere in that area.
Sugaring farm.
Yeah, we own 50 acres behind the little Northfield Street, and that's like right outside.
Oh,
So we
that's
have a
right.
donor for the park. That's excellent.
Yeah, we're probably some, I don't know. It helps.
I don't know. I'm not gonna start adding candidates, but I think if we understand like these points are not intended to be exact or someone one sees like putting a park on my
That's
property.
I think an evolve that's along the same lines as one we just did, but it's more of evolve than a transform, is to evolve the winter recreational environment in Montpelier. I feel like the things don't have to be so dead in winter, and I think this goes into economic development, some other things. Climbing gym, greenhouse, there's like attractions that could be like winter, give you something to do in the winter.
Like, are there any, what's the status of the stump dump?
What do you mean by status?
Still a dump.
Still active.
When is it open?
No, I mean, who controls it? Can we do anything with it?
It is Public Works.
Is it worth considering? I mean,
It is Public Works and is primarily used, it is used as a stump dump still. It is the old city landfill, so it is has a classification in there for that. But it's used for the stump and is also used for snow dump as well. It is one of our last ones we have left.
Tires.
I thought that's what we used my street for.
Oh, dumping snow. Let's just plow it there and leave it.
Because that's what's been happening.
Oh, yeah, well, there's not enough space to deal with all the snow.
Yeah, the unfortunate part is we've lost a number of our snow dumps with changing rules. So we used to use a lot of our floodplains for snow storage, and we can't use our floodplains for snow storage anymore.
Dump
So
snow into Winooski.
Happens a lot.
That seems
so-
reasonable.
It happens a lot,
I have a
even though
photo
it's
from
against.
Kirby's
Yeah,
deck, not even just her window,
yeah.
of all of the various
You
private.
can look
and-
down
it used
the
to be
river.
used to be
and see
floodplains
all the
though. They used to
places.
go under there used to be a large snow dump under the I-89, so they used to just go down there, dump it on the land, and let it melt there. But we can't use that one anymore.
Yeah, my first floor of my house is very thankful that doesn't happen anymore because it's not as at much risk of being underwater.
Ooh. Going up this way.
All the way up to Wrightsville.
How about we maintain protection of the floodplain? Right,
Yeah,
what-
river-
what-
river-
river
river corridor.
corridor, thanks, Mike. So, Aaron, was there one about the stump dump that you wanted to add?
no, just curious. I don't know what.
If there was an opportunity
Yeah,
there that was
it
not being.
Sounds like there's no opportunity.
There are some trails that you can,
Definitely.
Yep, there is.
Yeah.
The trails do come in and go around it on the hillside.
Yeah.
The south side of it.
Um,
It's good to see Google Maps finally updated the stump dump road to Finch Road.
Was it called Step Dump?
it was,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because there were no other houses on it, so it used to be just called Dump Road, and then we changed it to Stump Dump Road. And then once a residential development appeared on the north side of the road, they requested that their mailing address not be Stump Dump Road, so.
Seems reasonable.
My property is beautiful. With lots of finches. I presume.
Oh.
I think so, I don't know.
Seems like at the least we could come up with multiple uses out there. Like, has there not been?
Rather than just one.
We studied it
Like
for
put
the
solar
solar.
panels.
We studied it for solar and it didn't work for solar.
Why not, just the way that
The way the landscaping, the hill kind of goes up. And so that's why we ended up with the city's solar farm is at Log Road instead, which is just a little bit farther north.
What's going on with
Redstone?
Redstone.
Redstone?
There was an auction, so that is a state-owned, was a state-owned, still is a state-owned, yes. Alan Goldman won the bid, but I think it's been a little bit of time, but he hasn't yet closed on purchasing it from the state. he's won the bid but hasn't closed on it. So we don't know what's going to happen with it until that step happens.
There's no crazy plan to connect to the long trail from there, or am I thinking of something else?
Yeah, that was in the newspaper.
Okay.
I think he said that.
He owns a number of, owns a lot of land, hundreds and hundreds of acres. And so his land goes from there, he owns the land that's all the trees to the west. And a lot of that extends out towards the Worcester range, where he thought if there was an organization that could help connect some other parcels, that you might be able to connect to Worcester, where we could connect up with the Long Trail and
Oops, I botched it.
You got, yeah,
Really
you seem
not
to,
used to
your
using
instinct.
your computer
As
here.
far as big housing transformations, though, yeah, that right there.
That would be great for
That's
housing.
walking to downtown, closer than Bailey, right?
Yeah,
Um,
be good for
Or
high
that.
school students.
yeah. Make that happen.
What about, and I don't know if this is part of the city plan, but human services, like, I feel like we didn't hear much about that from maybe the groups that were at that meeting, but has there been, I don't know, any talk of the human service community and what resources are important or what they might need? I don't know where we would find that.
What are some example of human services?
Well, like,
I don't know if I'm thinking of the right
I
things.
mean, I'm thinking, my husband is on the board of a drop-in center for psychiatric survivors, like, so I'm just thinking,
How can we promote?
yeah, I mean, just for the, you know, cause I don't know, sometimes talking about all the smart growth and stuff is great and the energy stuff, but I feel like we're talking to a certain group of people in Montpelier, and I just am wondering about other people who live in Montpelier and what their needs are.
yeah. So community services, we will have a chapter, and I think we have to have a chapter on services. And so community services will be one of those chapters. So we have a senior center. We have our recreation, not just recreation facilities, which might be on a facilities plan, but we also have services that go along with that, daycare, after-school programs. So as planners, we kind of have these three bubbles that overlap in a lot of ways. So the stuff we always focus in on are those built natural resource pieces. You know, a lot of what we've talked about here, streets and sewers and all these other things. And then you've got this second bubble, which is economic development. And then there's the third bubble, which is people. And that actually, ironically, ends up being the one that we forget about the most, are those social capital. And it's more difficult to plan for them, but at the same time, those are just as valid planning topics and
Well, it's good there's
Talk
a space
about-
for it.
yeah, equity and those types of issues, social equity, racial equity
So maybe we
has
should
a place.
put in a point somewhere downtown, just anywhere downtown.
Yeah, I'm not,
I think maybe coming up with some organizations to reach out to
Yeah.
get ideas from. I think Down Street's one.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
In each chapter, again, we talk about education. We have adult basic education services. So even when within our education chapter, we might talk about the school facilities and how much they could support and how much capacity they have. We can really talk about it in a bricks and mortar, nuts and bolts kind of way. But we can also talk about its link to economics and how, are we doing a good job of preparing kids for future economic opportunities? And we can also talk about the social, human interaction and those services that are available to people that aren't physical. They're about job training and retraining.
mhm.
So like identify human service related needs and priorities.
So I'd always encourage when those types of things come up, because that's always going to be the thing that, you know, certainly I'll call that my fault. My weakness is the human services and the social services, and remembering to include that component. So if you think we're missing something, it probably means we are, and we should be thinking about
One thing
things.
I'm aware of that the entire state needs is recovery beds. So for drug addiction, the state's done a lot in the last few years to help with treatment, and you can get at least some treatment in Vermont relatively easy compared to how it used to be now. But then recovery after treatment, there's almost nothing. And almost everything that does exist is in Burlington. So that was one thing I was going to bring up, was it fits into housing, it also fits into the services. This chapter that we're talking about fits into both, but having more of that.
Yeah, there was a lot of work that was done in the housing committees about homelessness in the past couple of years, and that's one that, you know, we talk a lot about housing, but we don't talk about what are the services that are needed to support that transition from homelessness back to housing.
Is there anything going on with Saban's pasture recently, or what's the status?
It's been silent the past year, at least on my front, downstairs. So, you know, certainly when the zoning was going through, there was a lot of discussions about the potential and possibilities, but ultimately at the end, we haven't heard much. But that's not to say that there isn't something somewhere percolating, but nothing that has made its way to my office downstairs.
Does the same family still own it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Zorzi's?
Yeah, Zorzi, Aja family. Although the parcel, if you look to the left of the screen, west, that part of that is owned by the college. So there's that, you see that one field, that's owned by the college. So there has been discussion of a potential project of a cottage cluster senior housing facility to go in there. But
I didn't put slopes on here, but that's also
yeah, the slopes plays a big part of all these discussions for those. But it's a good, you got some good data layers in there. Some of those I don't have.
Must have been
yeah. This
Cold
was
day.
last year. These are our orthos. We struggled to get. You can see a bit of snow still.
Oh,
Some
yeah.
parts. But the leaves were ready to pop.
Did we remove the museum?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I deleted that.
Good, that's a good loss. Okay.
Before that goes public.
Get rid of the music.
Get rid of it.
I'll get a call from Eric Gilbertson in the morning.
There was some talk about moving the historic building where Fog Capital is located. Mike, wasn't there?
Moving it?
Forward towards the street.
There's been a proposal because there is an application. Is there an application? Well, certainly it's not a secret that there has been the old gas station that was at the corner was purchased and demolished, and there will be a proposal to redevelop at that site. There was a discussion about potentially trying to move Faux Capital back up to the street, but that, as far as I know, has not materialized. So I think they're still moving forward with their plan to build a new structure there.
Safe to say that for this ocean of parking here that we wanna work towards maybe better use of it over time.
Yeah,
No.
how about that greenhouse Kirby was talking about? Indoor water park.
People would come. If you build it, they will come.
5-story skateboard park.
A pool would be great. Just a small lap pool, 25 meter,
Yeah,
great.
yeah, I know.
Just thinking of a greenhouse where you could like go and walk around somewhere where it's actually like warm. Activity. That's warm.
Who owns all that lot space back there?
Hmm?
Is that part of the Capitol complex, like this?
So state.
It's not in the Capitol complex, but the state owns the parking lot to the left,
Pit.
right there. That's
Yeah.
owned by, and then the other gray parking is owned by the insurance company.
And then this
And
is
then
the
it goes to
Postal
federal.
Service.
And courthouse parking, so.
And we heard some proposals to put a garage in behind 133 State, behind the Department of Taxes there. And that seemed like something that
Yep.
is appealing
Put in what?
to put a garage in there.
Yeah.
Because
Excuse
me.
that as opposed to the pit, which is much more
Yeah.
complicated with multiple
Right.
landowners. This one's just the state.
If
Yeah,
the
that
state
would be
wanted
great.
their own parking, they probably would be opting for one over here.
Because I think that the parking lot near where the Garden Park is in the river, we should try to move away from that one
Mhm.
to the right, yeah.
Yeah,
that one.
transform
Right
the
there,
green
transform
space.
into green space or, I don't know, river oriented.
Or any type
And
of
then-
redevelopment, even if it was residential or,
Yeah.
We have disengaged the river there.
I don't think that people would want to live that close to a highway, just residential.
Yeah.
well, we're gonna
Might be
have.
surprised though.
That would have to be like a mid-rise sort of thing, like the Taylor lot.
Yeah,
Maybe
and
a
I
big
think this
sweet
goes
location.
to the, most of the projects that we saw for Net Zero Montpelier competition, there were a lot of ideas in there that we could certainly kind of throw into that site.
Okay, what about this gateway? You tried to raise this earlier.
Yeah, well, I've got the question over here about what our vision is for really this entire area to the east and the south. And then, you know,
That neighborhood.
the neighborhoods up here, you know, what if anything, are there needs and what have they articulated?
What's happening in that space where the restaurant
There's,
was?
yeah,
Nothing yet.
Nothing. It's clean, but there's.
Well, I think we need some sort of connector, pedestrian connector up there. I mean, people can walk up and down Northfield Street, but it's pretty busy and.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the sidewalk ends, right, like around that car wash.
Yeah.
Oh, does it? Even after the
It
even after
does.
the project was
Um,
Northfield Street project was done.
Yeah, it doesn't go north.
Oh.
Or south, rather.
Just gonna put,
I'll have to see the gap analysis, see if that's another one that we flagged.
Yeah.
But I know one of the goals that we had before when we did the zoning was that we may not get mixed use neighborhoods. People like their residential neighborhoods, but we did want them to be walkable to an area where they might have some.
Yeah.
And this is an area that really, other than the hotel,
The Grange.
doesn't have that many opportunities for.
You live in this district too?
No, I live on Liberty Street,
Oh, okay.
but my parents own apartment buildings up there,
Oh, okay.
and a couple of my friends live there.
Yeah. I'm the only one on this commission who lives in that part of town. Everyone else lives in districts 1 and 2. sole voice for District 3 here. No, I think the whole commission thinks comprehensively about the city. I'm not that worried. But yeah,
I
and
just
then
wanna
there's
park in my backyard.
sort of that, John, since you were in that neighborhood, there's that residential neighborhood kind of, oh, you're classifying everything behind National Life and over there as part of one, I see. Yeah, okay.
And I put improve neighborhood connectivity to
Yeah.
downtown.
Do you wanna put something near the Econo Lodge, like encourage development of restaurant or bar? That would be pretty sweet, right there.
Be big fan of.
A nice
City
British
owns
pub
that.
or
The
something,
nice
would
Brisbane
that be?
would
Yeah.
be great, with some trivia on a different night.
Does the city own that parcel now, right?
No, we don't. It's still owned by the Econo Lodge folks.
Fish and chips, soggy mushy
A
peas.
pub would do well in Montpelier. Note to people watching on TV.
But I'm sure when we talk to to Laura and the folks who are doing economic development, they would certainly be looking for sites that are available for redevelopment. And that might be one of them. At the same time, transportation may come in and say that's a great place for our park and ride lot to the downtown. So we'll probably get a couple of different ideas from folks that we would have to weigh in the end.
What are you thinking over there?
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know what National Life is up to. It does feel like it's an underused or a area with more potential than you have sort of these incredible views inland here that gets used once a year.
Mm-hmm.
We've had the proposal for the gondola up to National Life to get people up there, and then the proposal to have residential development up there, so that way it becomes more of a village. It would have the residential and these other opportunities. It's all owned by National Life, so it's something they would have to either partner on or support, but,
They seem to be very engaged in the community they support. I mean, basically their name is on every event
Event.
I've seen,
Yeah.
you know, every single playbill and poster, so.
We've run out of ideas, John.
We're done.
Yeah, that's it.
Should we,
Vision of the future.
Would it help to delegate some things for each of us to kind of interests that we have to come back with some ideas for? Is that something people are interested in? Like looking at human
Yeah.
services organizations to reach out to?
and
I'm happy to do that, or maybe I'm too tied into that world already. Too close to it, but I'm happy to do that.
May as well leverage that. Anything else we need to feel like we need to come back and
We can probably get maybe this goes within the same template of the other sort of goals, but a non-map based list of what our vision and maybe strategies are. So I
Yeah,
can
I mean,
add
maybe-
that to the page.
In our Google Drive, we have the notes from the top priorities from various committees. Maybe we could all just review that and plug in some of the ideas that we thought are a good idea. And maybe a specific homework item for you, Emery, is to think about any kind of complaints or ideas that you've heard from people your age who don't drive.
I hear like a lot, like everybody who lives like past Northfield Street, like about how dark and shady it is, kind of like on the walk, and like there's no sidewalks really, and it's
So-
kinda dangerous.
Maybe more lights.
But there's still people making that walk, even with that.
Yeah, like some of my friends, when their parents can't pick them up, they have to walk from the middle school all the way up to that little, like, loop near the number 8.
Is there a bus, or is that?
No, there's no buses for the middle school.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
But what's at the number 8? Is that just where they live, or they?
Just-
Yeah, that's just kind of the
Yeah,
entrance to
Colonial
Colonial
Drive.
Drive.
Oh, okay,
Which
so
is
they
the
live in that
residential.
area, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So they have to walk home, and it's kind of sketchy at night,
I usually walk down here, but now that they've had some,
logging.
yeah, occasionally gone down this way and it's just not fun.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, it's better than it used to be with the project, the recent project. I mean, I run up and down it sometimes, runs from and to work, and it has improved, but it's just a very narrow area. I don't know that there's a lot we can do for expanding it to make it safer, but maybe more lighting. That's helpful, I guess your homework's completed.
Are there other map layers to be, any ideas of things that people would like to see?
Well, we heard slopes.
Put the slopes up.
Property values, you can do that, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
The values will be based on the city's appraisal, I take it?
Yes. We could adjust it with the CLA, but we could just leave it as our
Yeah, it
assessed
doesn't
value.
change much between, when you're comparing across,
Right.
you
I was
raise
just, I was
everybody's
pointing out that it's
CLA,
not
yeah.
necessarily reflective of market value.
Right.
but-
What's CLA?
Common level of appraisal, so it's just a factor that the tax department calculates and will multiply for the purposes of the equalization payments for schools.
It just, it's to make up if you're trying to compare Montpelier to other towns, but we're not really doing that, so.
But it is always a good, interesting model to take a look at when you're looking at various projects, because you think, you know, oh, one tractor supply, that must be worth this much, and then you start realizing how much, like, if that were 5 houses would have generated more taxes than one tractor supply, just because the way it.
Right, you look at like China Star and the tattoo place, you know, not what most people would think of as high rent places, but this one parcel generates a lot of tax revenue per acre because it's used so efficiently. It has something like, I don't know, 20 apartments and 3 businesses in it. So if you take that and you multiply that over a block, you know, that's a tremendous amount of value compared to a number of other maybe less efficiently used places around town or around neighboring towns.
I have a question. Has there been, ever been any discussion about Stonecutter's Way? It seems just kind of random that we've got a street just kind of nestled in there, but
I'm sure that Tom McCardle could give a nice broad history of that, because it was state rail yard, and I don't know if it's still owned by the state and we lease it, or if it is actually been transferred to the city.
I think that would be a nice pedestrian path.
I've also heard a one-way street in McBury, one-way street in the opposite
Oh.
direction. Especially in the winter, that sounds like
Yeah.
a great idea, because Barry is absolutely horrifying.
They both are right
They-
now,
oh,
and
yeah.
I mean, it's just been a really terrible year for that. I read it in the bridge. No, you can
potholes
tell,
in
if you
my-
drive around town, you can tell.
The potholes in my neighborhood,
Yeah.
everywhere.
I don't know if this is a point for the map, but I think it's something that we have to think about as we have these downtown discussions, and that's the existence of the brownfields and there's contaminated sites, so we should all be aware of that.
Maybe that's a
along-
layer, Omar.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's something that's going to definitely affect what actually gets built or what happens, because it puts limitations on, especially the cost of putting something in each of these sites. And my understanding is pretty much all along the river there, because there used to be industrial stuff, pretty heavy
Yep.
in Montpelier at one point, before there was a lot of regulation.
I think there's economic development opportunities in this area too, down Ferry
Oh,
Street.
yeah.
Yeah, down in the
Yeah,
Montpelier
all
Granite
around.
Works and those other buildings in there, I think have been proposed for,
And now Kizzy is
redevelopment.
trying to do that.
What'd you say?
Kizzy,
Yeah.
what was the butcher shop?
How do we
Oh.
bring the
Hmm.
Where
butcher
the
shop
butcher shop
back? Can we
was.
just
Yeah,
put
that
that
was
on
amazing.
here?
I would take that. That was my neighborhood bar for a little while too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But I think there's there's opportunity in that area and there are enough people who live there, there could be more.
Yeah. And with the new bike path, we're gonna have more accessibility.
And now Caledonia Spirits further down, there's opportunity.
We do need a butcher, I agree.
The Perry Street stumble.
There you go.
So the gateway near there, we brought that up. It's kind of related to this area of the city, and it seems like you can commute by foot between the two of those. Are we thinking like industrial for the gateway? Because that's like seems like the only place that we have in this.
For this area?
Yeah.
Down by the roundabout.
What is the
Yeah.
Cross Vermont Trail? Aren't they doing something with the bridge over there, or?
it's being built right where you see the words Vermont Patient Alliance. It's going along that
Oh,
old
yeah.
country club road,
Yeah.
and then it goes down and it's coming back out over by Agway and
Yeah, one of the tough questions that a lot of communities struggle to address and deal with is when it comes to characterizing the purpose of various roads and streets is we have streets that are places for people, where we have businesses and homes, and that people should take kind of priority in terms of the design and the function, so it's okay that cars are slow there. And we have other road infrastructure that are designed or should be designed to move large volumes of vehicles. So, obvious one is Interstate 89. So it's best to pick one and move forward with that. And oftentimes people try to split the difference and they think they could make both. So then you have all of these trip generating uses with curb cuts on roads that are intended or originally were intended to move lots of cars that then become congested and are terrible places for people to walk on, and they now no longer serve any function in terms of they're not great at moving cars, they're not great places for people. They end up being very expensive in terms of infrastructure and very low in terms of yielding tax values, so they become a net loss. They increase our taxes because they aren't paying for the infrastructure that they're using. So identifying, what are areas that we are going to consider streets and invest in for things like sidewalks, and other areas where really they should be limited in terms of uses that generate trips, and are not going to be places where we want to encourage high levels of activity. And oftentimes things like industrial uses could be good potential uses there where they require maybe more space. They don't generate as much traffic, or the traffic that they generate is maybe more truck oriented and you don't want on your streets. So that's, a discussion we can have around some of these spaces over here. I don't know, it's not something we've talked about much.
And it seems like our options are actually quite limited. It seems like Route 2 is.
in through it too. Yeah.
about it as far as having those options, right? For us, the traffic moving type options.
Yeah, and where does it start and end, and
And we had a lot of discussion with that in our complete streets plan, the street typology. So as we get into talking about transportation plan, that's what we would probably be talking about, those exact things that they had to address when they were looking at that, which is, you know, what would be our perfect River Street and Berlin Street. You know, if we were to lay it out, we would have, you know, X for vehicle traffic, and we need pedestrians. If we're doing complete streets, we have to address how the pedestrians move through here, how do bikes move through here, and how do cars move through here. And we have to make sure we've accommodated all of them. And in some cases, with Northfield Street, we have failed to provide for all of our users. We aren't addressing how pedestrians move through this space. So that would be flagged in our transportation plan as a deficiency that it may take, you know, some of these may take, you know, decades. You know, we're missing sidewalks on East State, but that's because it would cost $750,000 to build the retaining wall to keep that sidewalk going on East State, just because there's just a cliff there. So some things just take time and lots of money to fix, but it's still there as a need. It just may be more difficult to fix.
get rid of cliff.
Just keep filling it. Yeah, there's a sidewalk gap a little bit farther up, I think. Yeah, that's where it crosses
It
over.
just crosses, right?
See, that's where it crosses, and there should be, you know, it's a pretty busy area. That road has enough pedestrian traffic that it should have sidewalks on both sides, but it has a gap.
Should we shut this down?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we should take this back up after a public hearing, so we have a public hearing in our next meeting, and then come back to this.
Well, I think it's the idea that we're all adding things in between, so we all take a look
So
and
how
add a
did-
little bit more and add.
Yeah, can you go through how you got here again?
So if you go to montp.city or plan.montp.city, it'll take you to the same place. If it's, and you go all the way to the bottom of this page.
Oh, yeah.
There's the links to the two maps here.
And these are open just to planning commissioners at this point, or is it open to the public?
Anyone can
Can
view
see
them,
it, but they won't be able to add
but
ones.
right, and if you log in with your Gmail addresses, which all of you have, then you can edit and edit the map.
And if you can't edit, send John an
Send
email.
me a note. You can also edit
He
this
can make
website.
sure
Anyone?
So should we just have a place on the agenda then to revisit, like, every time, just to see if anyone's added anything so they can go over it with the group? And in that way track
Yeah,
Like,
let's do that for now.
what we do in between meetings?
And if you didn't add anything at all, come prepared with something to add on that meeting.
Yeah, read a plan, come up with something.
Is there like a broad timeline for this, for the city plan?
My
Turn the lights back on.
Yeah. My hope has been that it's 12 chapters at a minimum, so that's going to take time to work its way through. So I've kind of said if we were done by the end of, and I mean like done with the whole plan and ready to go to public hearing by the end of 2020, I'd be happy, or even if it was adopted, I would be shocked, just because it takes.
Yeah.
Once we've come up with stuff and once we've gone to the committees, you know, if we're going to be inclusive, it takes time. If we want to write our own plan and just roll it out, then we'll get crushed, but we can get it done faster. So we really want to come up with proposals, work with the committees, work with the public, and then I think we'll end up with a really strong plan within that time frame.
We could also, if you go the energy part here, it takes you to this folder in Google Drive, which has the tables and not everyone loves spreadsheets, so there are other ways to kind of make this more accessible, but this has the idea of the vision, the goals with target date, data source, and priority ranking, and then strategies. I have it so that committees, if we wanted to set these up for committees, can basically select when they think it's ready to go to the PC, and they can have it all come together in one place.
And a lot of this is some of the stuff I'm going to be trying to kind of get prepared to help set the table for them, because it is a little bit complicated, and we had some models on how to have the conversation so it was consistent in how they all connected together between your aspirations or your visions, and then your goals and your strategies.
I need to leave a little early. I just made a couple of notes on these minutes. There's a couple typos and a vote needs to be changed.
Oh, your computer back.
Thanks, yeah,
I didn't shut it off.
it's okay. You probably want this stuff.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your work, John.
Yeah,
Really great.
it was a long time ago. Except for that other map, which I did moments before.
It was still great.
It was.
If you're gonna vote on the minutes now, I might as well just stay.
Well, does anyone have anything else about the city plan? Or else we can move on to the minutes and.
I moved to approve the minutes.
Hold on, I have some edits.
Oh,
I think Leslie
we get
has
it.
some edits, everyone.
John has made the motion. Do we have a second? Just so we can start discussion.
We can.
Second.
All right, Aaron's got the second.
I accept Leslie's edits.
Under, on the first page, under the final punch list item for zoning fixes, the last, paragraph, in the second sentence, just a small typo, but it says the administrative officer should have a way of settlements or coming into compliance, or of coming into, it should be for coming into compliance, I believe, just to be clear.
All right.
But this section was too restricted to allow that, okay, that's the first edit. Second edit is on the second page, under the motion to warn a hearing on bracket date, blah, blah, blah. The second sentence says the best way to process with the city plan, so I think that should be proceed instead of process.
Oh,
So,
proceed.
Just
Yeah.
forgot I had planning commission. She does not have a baby.
Oh, okay.
Where are you? Where are you? Where are you?
I know. High five, see you later.
And then, the final edit is right above the adjournment. The last sentence before adjournment is, the motion passed on a 3-0 vote with those who had been in attendance at that meeting. I am fairly certain that I also joined that vote, so it was a 4-0 because I knew we needed four for
We
a
needed
motion
four,
to carry.
correct.
So that would be my final correction.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can hand you this.
Hi.
Here, you got them.
Is everyone okay with the changes? Okay. So should we vote on approving the minutes with Leslie's changes?
Assuming John
Yes.
adopts them in his motion, it's his motion.
So
Yeah, I pre-accepted the.
I appreciate the
he
faith.
pre and post accepted. We'll take it. Okay, so with Leslie's changes, friendly amendment, blah blah blah, rules and stuff. Do we have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against?
Gotta
Okay.
love when the lawyers get to blah, blah, blah rules.
Yeah.
Robert's on thirty.
Yeah. Okay.
Important.
The minutes are approved, and that leaves us with number 7.
I move we
Adjournment?
adjourn.
Do we have a second? Okay. Not debatable.
Yeah.
And we are adjourned.
Okay. We have to,
Thank
we
you
have to
all.
vote, we do have to vote on that,